Today we're going to talk about olive oil, Protestantism, and how these two are weirdly connected. So, first of all, let me start cooking because my family is Italian and they need to eat for lunch. On the 31st of October of 1517, we have the famous day in which Martin Luther sticks up his 95 Theses, which could be theses, but I'm not sure about the plural of this word in English, in which he basically talks about what's wrong with the Catholic Church, the many things that he finds wrong with the Catholic Church. But how much of this Reformation is about theology and how much of it is about daily things, foodie things? As we know, food dictates a lot more in history than we are usually led to believe. October 1517 is the date that we set as the beginning of the Protestant Reformation and of Lutheranism in particular, because Martin Luther sticks up the famous 95 Theses to the doors of the church. Okay, how much of this is theology, however? How many of these complaints are theological complaints and how many are complaints which are more down to earth and actually concerning food? So we will discover at the end of this video how much olive oil actually plays a very important part in this. But let's start from the beginning. What is wrong with the Catholic Church in the eyes of Martin Luther during this period? We know that the main concern is the selling of indulgences. What are indulgences? Basically, we sin. By sinning, you make your way either to hell or to purgatory, which is another great invention, which we'll talk about on a later video. And if you make your way to hell, then that's it. But if you make your way to purgatory, you can then make your way up to heaven, and that can take more or less time. And things that can help with that are people praying for you, and something even more that can help with that is if your family pays people to pray for you. And that's one of the ways in which you can basically pay your way into heaven. And other things that you can pay for to make your way into heaven is indulgences that basically forgive your sins. And the church, starting in the Middle Ages and reaching a peak during the 1500s, gets very, very, very good at selling these. And in fact, they create an incredible market for the sale of indulgences. In the past, they used to be kind of like personal. So they used to be indulgences that were made for the person, all right? But in the 1500s, we start to have indulgences which are reeled out and sent out all over Europe to be sold to whoever may need them, okay? And indulgences aren't just for really big sins, which we might consider sins today, but also for very small sins that today we don't really take into consideration anymore, such as eating the wrong thing outside of the period of Lent. Okay, which is going to be the focus of this video today. Now, the guy that became really, really, really good at the selling of indulgences was Pope Leo X. Now, Pope Leo X started out, you know that they all change their names when they become pope. So before you're a pope, you have a different name, right? So his name before he became a pope was John of the Medici family. We're going to be talking a lot about the Medici family in later videos. These are the family of bankers that used to rule over Florence during the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance period. All you need to know today is that John of the Medici family comes from this banking family and he becomes Pope Leo X. So what you get, if you get a very powerful pope from the 1500s coming from a banker's family, you get a pope that really knows how to make money and how to spend it too. Just to give you an idea, when he becomes pope, he parties for 3 days along with all his mates and along with a load of other people. And the famous words that he said when he became pope was, "God gave us the papacy, let us enjoy it." And enjoy it he did. Just to give you an idea of the level of partying that went on, a small child was entirely covered in gold leaf, and so he could prance about on the table pretending to be a cherub. And if you've seen Goldfinger, you know 007, you know that that does not end well. However, the family was reimbursed And that also ate into a small part of the money that Pope Leo X had available at the beginning of his papacy. He ran out of his entire budget in the first 2 years. So he needed to start making some more money. And selling indulgences at the level in which he started selling indulgences was something that definitely needed to be done if the partying needed to go on. So with Pope Leo X, we have a level of decadency within the church, within the Church of Rome, that was just unacceptable anymore to someone like Martin Luther. So for this reason, we do have a lot of reasoning coming from Martin Luther, which is about theology and about how basically you can't buy your way into heaven. You can't buy your way out of sins. And most of the sins that the Catholic Church was advertising as sins in the eyes of Martin Luther is just a load of BS. It's not sins, okay? What you eat, who you marry, doesn't really... I'm crying now. I think I'm gonna have to take a break in a moment. Mi sono dimenticata dov'è che mi sono persa, dove devo riniziare. So essentially Martin Luther is like, you can't buy your way into heaven. Most of the sins that you guys are talking about are BS, and really God is concerned whether you believe in him and whether you're an awful person, but most of these sins are just made up, okay? So where does olive oil come into this? All right, I will get there. So in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about what olive oil is and why it is important to the Catholic Church. Why was the Catholic Church concerned with it in the first place? Now, first of all the cultures and religions of the Mediterranean have identified with olive oil at some point and still do so today. I mean, God knows Italy identifies and Italian people identify with olive oil on a regular basis. What do I mean by identify? I mean that they take this product and the plant that produces it as a symbol, okay? Think about the Greeks, all right? The ancient Greeks, Athens being the most famous city coming out of ancient Greece, really saw olive oil as such an important product that it was almost a symbol of their people. The story, you know how the Greeks always had these myths of how things came to be. So the myth that they have around how the olive tree came to be is actually the same myth that tells about how Athens became called Athens, all right? Now, the story goes like this. I'm going to keep it brief, last famous words. The city, which was not yet called Athens, was trying to decide which patron deity it was going to choose to be their protector. And there were two deities, Poseidon and Athena, who were kind of fighting over this really powerful city, trying to convince it to choose them as the major deity, as the patron god or goddess, all right? So Poseidon comes along and he says, well, I have a gift for you people. I have horses. And it's not just like a bunch of horses. He's like saying, there's no horses been here up till now. The world has not seen horses. This is a myth, okay? And I am gifting you horses and everything that comes with it, which in a time without cars is pretty cool to be able to have a horse, right? Athena, which is my favorite, she comes along and says, you think you're cool giving them horses? I have the olive tree, baby. So again, I'm not just giving you any olive tree. I am giving you olive trees when we've never had olive trees before this moment, all right? And you know what Athens chooses? They choose, well, they're called Athens, so you know who they choose. They choose the olive trees and they choose Athena, okay? Now, to be fair, like, horses were not that cool at that time yet because most people didn't know how to ride them. So, I mean, if you don't know how to ride a horse, it's not really doing much for you. So there is that to be said. However, they do choose olive trees because of olive oil over horses, okay? Because olive oil was fundamental. You have to understand that olive oil was not something just that you ate and showed off in front of Americans with, okay? It was something that you washed with. Before soap, you would cover your body with olive oil and then scrape the olive oil off, and that's how you would wash your body. And in fact, that leaves your body very nice and supple, or your skin, and in fact, that leaves your skin really nice and supple. Something else that you did with olive oil was produce pharmaceuticals, and still even during the Middle Ages, Even to this day, Benedictine monks, they will take olive oil and they will take herbs and put them inside the olive oil, and then you'll leave the herbs inside the olive oil for a very long time, and it will seep the properties out of the plant, and you will be left with a macerated oil which is used for pharmaceutical purposes. Still to this day, but certainly already in ancient Greek times and all throughout even the Middle Ages, this was done. Okay, so as you can see, olive oil is just a very important part of our everyday life. Other important religions and cultures which identify with olive oil are the Jewish religion. Islam also talks about in the Quran about olive oil being sacred and the olive tree being sacred, and of course Catholicism. Okay. Now, in Catholicism, we do use, as with the other monotheistic religions I quoted, we do use olive oil in cult and in ritual. And in theory, that's the only thing that you're supposed to burn in the lamps in a lot of our temples. However, there's also an important part from a culinary sense, because during Lent, that is the only fat that you're allowed to eat. Now, what is Lent? Now, just let me wash these tomatoes. So Lent is a period of 40 days leading up to Easter, during which, according to the Catholic Church, you're not allowed to eat animal products, so milk, cheese, meat, butter, and things like this. Now, today, no one really observes Lent. Although I did live a year in Cyprus, and I noticed that a lot more people observe Lent there than they do here. However, during the Middle Ages, everyone used to observe Lent, okay? And it wasn't only Lent. At the beginning in the Catholic Church, you were not supposed to eat animal products on Fridays, which still maintained during recent times, but as I said, even today, not a lot of people do that. But in the early Middle Ages, it was another 2 days a week in which you weren't supposed to eat animal products. So that, if you add up the days, that's almost half of the year in which you're not allowed to eat animal products. Now, if you're living in Italy, that's fine, because olive oil everywhere, we all make our own olive oil. This is my olive oil from my olive trees, okay? So pretty easy to do, all right? And in fact, most animal products were finished by the time you reach the period of Lent. I mean, butter had certainly gone off if you didn't have a fridge. Most people did not eat butter in Italy during the Middle Ages. And a lot of animal products were actually finished in your larder by the time you reach Lent. So it was a good, healthy thing to do, but it was also a practical thing to do because you were just out of food by the time you reach this time of the year. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about Carnival in one of my next videos, okay? So look out for that one. So basically, eating a vegetarian diet for 40 days or more is really quite easily if you live in the Mediterranean. Olive trees are native to the Mediterranean. Originally, they came from Greece and they were imported here in pre-Christian times. And really, even in northern Italy, they have a hard time growing. There are a few exceptions, and maybe with the change of climate, we'll start seeing olive trees being grown more and more north. Lake Garda in northern Italy has wonderful olive trees, but in general, you don't really get olive trees a lot more north than Tuscany and Umbria, where the best olive oil is produced, of course, which is where I live. If you're living in Germany, your olive oil or your vegetable oil has to come from the Mediterranean. It has to come from the south. Okay, so very easy for the Catholic Church to say you all have to observe Lent when they're living in Rome, but certainly not easy for people living in Germany and Northern Europe whose only access to fat and protein is basically animal fat and protein. Okay, but have no fear, the Catholic Church has a solution for this too. We will sell you the olive oil, okay? And this was even more annoying because they were transforming the problems which were coming from their own rules into a way of making money, into an opportunity to make money for themselves, okay? In fact, they were the ones which were protecting a lot of the enterprises which were selling olive oil to Northern Europe. There's actually a funny phrase by Martin Luther. I want to quote it exactly to you. He writes this in 1520 exactly about this. And he says, in Rome, they make a mockery fasting. Fasting is basically when you're on Lent and you're not eating all of the things that we talked about. In Rome, they make a mockery fasting while forcing us to eat an oil they themselves would not use to grease their slippers. So what he's saying is like, they do whatever they want. They make us do this Lent thing and they make us observe all these rules. Then they allow themselves to do whatever they want because you can pay and be forgiven for whatever you want. And then they sell us an olive oil that they would not even use to oil their shoes, to polish their shoes with. I think that's hilarious. And going back to the fact that you can pay for your sins. So you can sin for the Catholic Church. This is Martin Luther's view, okay? You can sin for the Catholic Church as long as you pay for your sins, was exactly true, okay? I mean, in France, we have what are called butter boxes in the church. So boxes where you would put the money that you're paying for having the right to sin during Lent and so to eat butter. And a lot of this money often would be going into the refurbishing and the rebuilding of the churches. So some of the towers, some of these churches were actually nicknamed butter towers because of this, okay? So as you can see, these are very practical, everyday, foodie reasons for Luther to use when trying to fight against the Catholic Church and trying to start something new, which ends up being Lutheranism, and not only Lutheranism. So as you know, a lot of other churches will follow suit. For example, in Switzerland, a few years later, we have the sausage revolution, in which a priest started the Reformation by eating sausage right in front of his church on the first day of Lent. So food plays a very important part in the Reformation and in the advent of the Protestant church. So what do you think about olive oil, and what do you think about how we identify in different foods as cultures? I love talking about this, and I love talking about how food plays such an important part in history, and which is often overlooked. I definitely find myself as someone that identifies a lot in the food I eat and the food of my land. And I hope you like this video and you subscribe to learn more about all the things which I find interesting and curious. See you next time on The Curious Cat.